Good morning, everyone. My name's Mike Rigby, and I'm the lead member here at Somerset Council for Planning, Transport, Economic Development and Assets. I have with me colleagues, Councillor Bill Revan, Leader of the Council, Councillor Richard Wilkins, the lead member for Transport and Waste, and I have apologies from Graham Oakes, and we have a wide selection of officers, and I'm pleased to see members of the public here today. Interested members of the public here today as well. So welcome everybody to today's meeting. We will run this using the webcasting system via Microsoft Teams. Committee members and key officers are physically present in the Luttrell room here at County Hall today. Other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific agenda items or to observe. This meeting is being webcast and therefore other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely. The agenda pack with papers is available via ModGov or directly from the council website from the link which was sent out to members. When you're invited to speak, please could you state clearly who you are for the benefit of everyone who's listening, so they can identify who is speaking. Please advise those present at the meeting. I want to advise those present at this meeting that the session is being audio recorded. And finally, if agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information. So we'll move to the agenda proper. Item 1, apologies for absence. Josh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've got apologies from Councillor Graham Oakes.
Thank you very much. Item 2, minutes from the previous meeting. This is just to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October. Do I have a proposer for accepting the minutes? Bill, thank you. And seconded by Richard. All those in favour of accepting the minutes, that's carried. Item 3, declarations of interest. Anything that anyone needs to lay out on the table before the meeting? No? Good. Okay, we'll move on to item 4, public question time. And we received questions from 4 members of the public, and we'll go please first to David Redgewell for his question.
Thank you, Chairman. So my questions are basically about the bus service improvement plan bus grant money, approximately 6 million. So my first question really is about infrastructure and asking about spending the money wisely on key public transport corridors, so that if we're going to put in new shelters, real-time information, and bus borders, and of course, as you all know, I use a wheelchair, castle curbs for disabled access to the buses, that we actually do it on a corridor basis across the. So you see an example, Mike, from say Taunton to Minehead, or from say Taunton to Bridgewater, and then maybe through to Highbridge and Weston eventually. But that sort of approach, or Taunton to Wellington. And then if we're going to do corridors in key principal urban areas like Frome, Bridgewater, Yeovil, that again we take the same approach based on the fact that those are the places we're taking economic growth, housing, jobs and schools, and particularly jobs. So that would be the approach. And if there's real-time information proposals, that we do try and work with the north of Somerset, where they're obviously upgrading the corridor from Bristol to the Farrington Gurney boundary, or Bristol to the Edgerchill Compton, Bath to the Edgerchill Compton, that we may be to run those real-time information screens and systems down to at least as far as Street and Wells bus station. So that sort of approach using the limited amount of money. And my second point is about services. £3 million, somebody understands buses, is not a lot of money. It doesn't buy you a lot of bangs for your buck, but it can be used quite successfully to enhance services. Obviously, we've got to maintain the 54 and the 25 and the other and the 126, and the services are vital on the bus service improvement plan already, and make sure First doesn't make any more cuts as they're doing at present in Cornwall. But also looking at whether enhancing, I would very support Bridgewater town services in Yeovil in the evenings, and making sure those places, and maybe looking at whether there's a option for improvements on the 377 from Bristol to 376 actually from Bristol to Yeovil, maybe on Sundays. Building on the existing contracts, Wecker run a bus to Street, so there might be some options there. And then the other issues is Saturday services. Of course, we don't have a Saturday service between Shepton Mallet and Frome, and we don't have a Shepton service that comes in from Frome through Colford and into Midsummer Norton, where you've got a lot of young people want to access Bath and services and jobs and employment. So I'd be looking at those sort of very sensible use of the money. And obviously, hopefully, there's another big bus grant coming from a 3-year settlement between the government and Somerset Council and the West Country Councils for the next financial year. But it's only a limited amount of money, and I think we could spend it 50 times across the county. But we do need to enhance, and the 25 is also important to Wiveliscombe. Those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and for keeping that succinct. And over to Natasha for a response.
Thank you. Natasha Bates, Service Commissioning Manager for Passenger Transport. So in response to David's questions, so question 1, we're reviewing the current evening services in Taunton, and in addition to this, we're considering options to provide evening bus services in both Bridgewater and Yeovil. Delivery of these services will be based on the current funding model in Taunton, which provides additional funding to commercial daytime services and provides extra journeys on the existing services up until approximately 11 p.m. We're continuing to discuss options with local bus operators, and we're also due to meet with Dorset County Council, GWR and SWR shortly with regard to services in the Yeovil area. And then moving on to the second part of the question, we will be developing a strategy for waiting facilities for passengers, including bus shelters, and the provision of real-time information at key locations across the county. Once this strategy is developed, we will begin the rollout of a bus stop improvement programme within the county, and development of the strategy will include engagement with relevant stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Natasha. And as a regular user of the evening buses, I'm very pleased to see them being rolled out to other parts of the county, so residents there being able to go to the pub as well. Thank you. Second public question is from Peter Travis. Peter, with us?
Yes, I'm with you virtually, Mike.
Good, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you, Peter.
Great. I want to raise an issue about the Somerset Transport Plan, whose vision is to build a fairer, greener, resilient, more flourishing and connected transport network. Fundamental to that is the requirement to reduce transport emissions in Somerset. And that's going to require a significant modal shift, chiefly from single occupancy cars to more sustainable means of travel. Biking, cycling is undoubtedly more sustainable, a lot more sustainable, but is it right to focus as much attention on cycling as we see in the draft Somerset Transport Plan? Given that 80% of Somerset's emissions result from journeys of 5 miles or longer, which for most of us, but not perhaps Mike, would be a challenging bike ride, and as our county's population is aging, plus the sort of weather we've had this year, cycling is undoubtedly a factor, but not perhaps where the solution lies. Professor Graham Parkhurst, Professor of Sustainability and Mobility at UE Bristol, has said the bus remains central to achieving modal shift. Undoubtedly that applies to Somerset, given the size of the council area and the nature of the distribution of towns across the county. But if buses are central to modal shift in Somerset, then Sarah Dyke and Gideon Amos have both recently pointed out in the House of Commons that Somerset has the worst rated bus service in the country. The challenge this poses for Somerset in its aim to reduce transport emissions isn't really recognised or properly addressed in the draft Somerset Transport Plan. There are solutions to improving Somerset's buses, all of which require money, and it's good our MPs are regularly making that point about Somerset's need for funding to government transport ministers. One solution, of course, is bus franchising, a prospect that to date has not been met with great relish by Somerset's senior officers, despite bus franchising being actively encouraged by the government, and it's also part of the Lib Dem policy agenda. Not a mention of bus franchising in the transport plan, nor is there a mention of the Heart of Wessex. Okay, it may be currently stalled, but we have to assume only temporarily so. But for Somerset to join the Heart of Wessex combined authority would have a momentous impact on Somerset's transport plan going forward, if only because it would result in a lot more funding, we hope, coming our way. So we look forward to the next iteration of the transport plan. It would be interesting to know how the details of how extensive and indeed how inclusive, so that all demographics get recognised, the consultation process will be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and over to Matthew Prince for a response.
Thank you, Chair. The local transport plan covers all transport modes and places in Somerset. It is recognised that public transport is a significant challenge and opportunity. The local transport plan sets out our policy for how we see transport developing and where investment will be targeted to work towards those goals. This is a draft plan. It will go out to our communities for consultation and discussion, the results of which will inform the final iteration of the LTP. The recent announcement on devolution by the government led to an expression of interest being submitted by Somerset in conjunction with our neighbouring authority. When the government are minded to progress devolution in our area, we will be keen for public transport to be a priority, and we will update the LTP accordingly.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Our third question today is from Barry Child. Barry.
Okay, Barry Childs, I'm a management team member for Somerset Bus Partnership. I'm also a member of the Heart of Wessex bus franchising team, and we're putting together a detailed proposal to present when the time comes, which we hope will be considered in the fullness of time. I've come to you today to speak about the introduction of the new timetable and the proposed dates of the 6th of April that I consider utterly unrealistic, and I think you'll find that First Bus Somerset agree with that. The problem is the council set dates twice a year to change the timetables, but all that's been thrown into disarray by the timing of the BSIP award and the subsequent delays with getting advice from government, coupled with Somerset Council's own internal processes that mean you're not able to commit to BSIP funding until March or the spring, as you've said in the public press release. That throws up a lot of problems. We represent bus passengers in the Somerset Council area. The timetable as it stands is impossible to fulfil, because when the network is agreed, when the changes are agreed with the council, and I know you're meeting the operator again on Thursday, when those changes are agreed, they have to put together their detailed timetables. I have all the drafts here. It's quite complex. There's a lot of changes. Their network department have to agree and sign all that off before they send it to their marketing department that create the bus timetables, the internet versions, the PDF, the printed booklet that we distribute thousands of on behalf of the bus company, and the bus timetable cards, the actual physical cards that go in the bus stop timetable cases. 6th of April was a completely unrealistic delivery date in the circumstances. We know you've set the dates and we know that you want to keep them in concert with the WECA changes, but the interface with WECA is quite insignificant compared to the need to get everything in place for an ordered timetable change. We, at the moment, haven't had the opportunity to discuss any of the changes with our various bus user groups around the county, various parish councils. There's no chance of us having input if these things aren't set in stone until 2 or 3 weeks before implementation. The publicity won't be in place. So I'm appealing to you to please consider delaying introduction of the new timetable for 2 weeks until the 20th of April. Cornwall Council responded positively to that request. They are changing their timetable 2 weeks later, and yet the process between First Bus in Cornwall and Cornwall Council is a lot further down the road than it is here in Somerset. So that is my main request. There's lots of things to consider with the changes. The 25 and the 26, the council taking over the service between Wiveliscombe and Dulverton. As far as I'm aware, there's been no discussion about guaranteed connections between First Bus at Wiveliscombe, no discussion about through fares for passengers travelling west of Wiveliscombe. There really is a lot of changes. The proposed changes by First Bus envisage the service being operated with a lot less buses again. The PVR is being cut on so many services, more services going out to tender, more services being axed. It is more controlled shrinkage of the bus network in Somerset, and these things need to be discussed. Somerset Bus Partnership want to have some input into the process at the appropriate time, but the timetable that you've set is completely unrealistic to allow that to happen, and bus users will suffer accordingly. There's lots of things to be considered with these changes that I don't believe have been considered, and we would like to have a voice, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry, and over to Natasha Bates for a response.
Thank you. We acknowledge that the timescales are challenging, but we are required to follow the correct democratic processes related to decision making. And whilst operators may not be able to register all of their changes in the required timescale, Somerset Council will support at short notice any registrations related to increased BSIP funding, as this is in the public interest. Through the enhanced partnership, we agreed to 2 timetable change dates per year, which was supported by members of the Bus Advisory Board. We were also asked to ensure that our change dates aligned with the West of England Combined Authority, so WECA. And we have checked with WECA, and their change date for Easter remains on the 6th of April 2025, and therefore we are aligning to this date as requested.
Thank you very much, Natasha, and thank you for your question, Barry. Our fourth question today is from Rosa Kell. If you could touch yourself next to Barry, that'd be great.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. I'm going to be very brief because I believe David Redwell has actually asked all of my questions. And obviously we represent the Wells to Western bus passengers, the Wells, Shepton Mallet, down to Frome, up to Bristol, up to Bath passengers. The question is very much, would you consider using some of the BSIP money to connect the WECA real-time information network in through the major points here within Wells, down to Glastonbury Street? After all, it's the same routes, it should have the same public information. And would you be kind enough to support the 162 and 184 bus improvements as outlined? I may also take the opportunity to support Barry in his request, would you please delay the implementation date? I know we have agreed through the Bus Advisory Board that we should have a united change date. However, there's only 3 buses that would be affected by a changing on a different date between the majority of southern Somerset and the bit like North Somerset. So I will leave it up to you to make a appropriate, justified decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosa, and over to Sam for a response.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Rosa. Morning. So you're right that David picked up most of your questions, but just in response, really, we'll be developing a comprehensive real-time information strategy because we don't have that at the moment, and it's important that we do things strategically. So once we've done that work, we'll be able to then discuss the specific rollout, that and the locations, etc., etc. On the 162 and the 184, we've obviously received a steady stream of representations from across the different members of the public, and we're reviewing those requests on a regular basis, alongside those with the bus partnership requests that we've already had. So final decisions in relation to the funding will be approved through the council's governance process, as we previously discussed.
Thank you very much, Sam, and thank you for your question, Rosa. And thanks to all of you for asking questions today, particularly on the issue of buses. We're all in the same boat in that we want to see improved services. I think, having held the portfolio before Councillor Wilkins and the work that he's continued to do, we are seeing improvements to the point where some of the services have got a new issue of overcrowding. So they're a bit of a victim of their own success, and another problem that we're going to have to deal with, and one that I've been working with Councillor Wilkins and the transport team on in recent days. So very pleased to see that you've got that interest in the bus service, and that you continue to press us to improve that service for the people of Somerset. If we can move now to item 5, the local transport draft plan. We have a draft going out for consultation, and I'd like to invite Matthew Prince to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I have a short presentation, which I will just attempt to get up now. Apologies. Thank you. Yes, I'm here to run through the local transport plan. This is a quick presentation. Everything that's in this presentation is in the local transport plan. So if you miss it, it is in the plan. Just briefly, the local transport plan is something that was made provision for many sort of years ago in the Transport Act. We subsequently have sort of set out our policies in previous times, and they are based on it's a strategic document that looks at the transport system in Somerset overall, and it sets out the vision for transport modes. It's subject to public consultation, which is what we're kicking off here, and it's a way of us being able to communicate to the Department of Transport, who obviously are our main contributors in funding, what our priorities are, what our investment needs are. But without an LTP, we will struggle to get that money in. And so it is an important document, not just for financial terms, though. It is an important document for us to make decisions against when we're making our investment priorities going forward. It's important for Somerset because it's an umbrella strategy, and the way we're approaching this is that it sort of has to clearly communicate Somerset's priorities to both internal and external stakeholders. So that goes beyond just having a nice document. It's actually how we work as a council to deliver services across the board. It's important to note that transport is our biggest contribution for carbon locally, and we have done extensive study work on this, and has I think been before committee over a year ago, but we will have that as an addendum in the local transport plan, and it sets out what our options are for reducing carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. And future government funding is linked to carbon, and we know that we're already having to prove our carbon reductions on certain schemes. It's not in isolation. It's not a document just to talk about transport, it does bring in public health, the environment, economy, all these other things, air quality, to ensure that we are delivering transport for everybody and transport that supports the needs of Somerset. We don't want siloed delivery. So the LTP is about how we work together across the council so that we don't end up with both piecemeal delivery and piecemeal funding. We want to be able to, in the future, put out a case that says this is what we want to do as a corridor, or as a system, or as a network, and make sure that we can deliver that rather than piecemeal. We are seen in transport terms to enable growth, health and wellbeing, social economy. When I started in transport, it wasn't. It was all about A to B, how we got people from A to B. Now it's much more about a whole host of topics as well. And we want to get a multi-year settlement if we can, and this is the way to do it. Our LTP is vision-led. So in the past, you would have heard the phrase predict and provide. This is much more about decide and provide. So we are deciding how we want Somerset to look, and then looking at how we provide those services, which is why this LTP is much more strategic. And it's asked us those sort of questions. What place do we want to create? There is a strategic relationship between the local transport plan and the local plan, which is in development at the moment. And I assure you that we are very much talking to our planning colleagues all the time, as well as our economic development teams, highways teams, climate. We talk to a lot of people internally to make sure that we are in sort of agreement with each other. We have tested this on a range of focus groups and individuals to make sure that we are moving in the right direction and we're listening to them. But it is an early stage consultation, because the draft is going out for full consultation, which will enable everybody to respond. And finally, we want to join up amongst other internal departments to make sure that we are not going beyond what is important in the council plan set by the executive and set by our councillors at the start of their tenure. It is a place-based approach. It's very much about places and people. It's very much more about how we connect places together and understanding different place types in Somerset. Unlike a large city, we have quite a very diverse, within a matter of a mile or so, you can go from one place type to another, from an urban to a very rural situation. So we have used a variety of sources to identify different places types. We can't write a plan for every single place in Somerset. That would be very, very long. But what we have done is we have moved to a point where we have grouped similar types of settlements together. So the obvious ones are big ones like Taunton, Yeovil, Somerset and Frome, Bridgewater and Frome. They are large areas, but we've also got linked towns, which are, you will see sort of Wells Street, Glastonbury, Shepton. These are places where there is a major set of facilities that link to other settlements. So Shepton has a Scottish hospital in there, and that provides services to a wider hinterland of towns as well. Coastal towns, obviously, they speak for themselves. They have a fairly significant tourism agenda, and then we have some mid-sized towns that sit there: Chardon, Wellington, Crewkerne. On the rural side, which is equally as important, we have three categorizations, which sounds like less than the urban, but what we have got is we've got a decreasing set of service principles that are there. So the primary service centres, as you'll see, places like Langport and Bruton have quite a lot more going in the town in terms of secondary schools, whether they've got big shopping centres and transport nodes. Local service centres, you'll see around about sort of smaller levels of facilities, and then you get down to the small rural settlements. Now that section is divided into three, and it's got, we have sort of what we call the connected settlements, where there are transport links established there, and A roads and B roads. We've got small settlements under 250 people, and then we've got you know, the small sites, isolated dwellings, the hamlets and those sort of places. So we are trying to cover a large multitude of place types. We have a vision. Our vision is very much about people and about what we would like to deliver, and sustainability, healthy living, reduced environmental impacts, and a resilient and reliable network. It's not, we want this many buses, we want this many cyclists, we want this many at that level. It translates down into how we operate in terms of active travel, walking and cycling, sustainable new development, reduction in road casualties. All these things are underneath this wider umbrella. And it sets us forward for making sure that when we deliver transport, it's not just about A to B, it covers a wider result out of that. This is a big screen full of a lot of writing. I don't expect you to read it, but what I do is the vision then translates down into place types. So I've taken the rural example here. On the left-hand side is the longer part. That is the strategy for the whole of the rural area, broken down into the 4 visions. And then as we move to the right, you will see them translating down into, sorry, start again. The one on the left is the whole of Somerset. Sorry, it's really small writing on my screen, so I apologise. The one on the left is the whole of Somerset. The middle one is what we would do in rural areas. And then the one on the right is the strategy for a specific place type. So as you can see, it does filter down through the vision, and the vision is always the key point of coming back to our LTP. But what it does do is it translates down, and you'll see obviously things get smaller, but it does mean that everything in the one on the far left translates into the right as we go across. So nobody is sort of excluded just because we're in one place type from the Pan Somerset thing. Where we are now, well, we're in the draft version. We've got the place types out. We've done a quantified carbon study. It's not on every single policy, but it is around, that will be the next stage. But we have done a significant amount of carbon work, which has informed what we can do next. There is an evidence base behind all of this, and again, that will be published. And we've taken a long time, two years to get to this point. A lot of that time has been developing these things, and some of that time has been waiting for guidance and advice from the DfT, which I'll be honest with you, we still haven't received. But we are going ahead because we know how important it is to unlock funding going forward, and it's fairly okay because we've been talking to the DfT and they've been sharing with us what they expect. So, you know, whilst we haven't had specific guidance, we have had a lot of guidance in the discussion and work with the DfT. We have a long list of schemes. The reason we haven't published it alongside this is because we want to get the principles and the strategies right, so that when we come to the long list of schemes, we filter those according to an approved documentation that we've consulted with the general public. And it's very difficult to create a document where if we put a load of different schemes in, it becomes a very long and unmanageable document, and people focus on an individual scheme rather than a wider subset of schemes. But the long list will become a short list, and all of that will become public knowledge, and we'll go through the relevant procedures for that too. We're now in the committee circuit for the approval to go to consultation. We're sort of out of order, but mainly because of the way Christmas and the committee structure fell. But we're going to scrutiny next Monday, and then we are going to take this to an informal executive just for information as well. So what happens next? Public consultation. We'd like to start that in April. We aim to give our town councils and our local community network and parish councils a little bit of a head start, because they need their meetings, the way their meetings work sometimes falls out of sync with the consultation. So we want to give them the full opportunity. We will do a strategic environmental assessment, which will be, that has to be done. It's mandatory alongside the consultation. We will develop the long list into an investment strategy. As I said, it will be a 5-year investment strategy, and then we'll go through the final adoption process in the autumn. And that's it, really. That is as far as I can go through. As I say, the document, I would apologise of the document that went out for consultation at the moment, purely because it's poorly formatted, but that's because we don't want to take it to our design colleagues and overload them before we've got a document that everyone agrees we can go out for consultation on. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Good run through there, and I think it's given us all a good idea of what the plan is for. I particularly like the way it's laid out in themes. I think that helps people to follow the parts that they're particularly interested in. But I'd like to throw open the floor to questions. Councillor Wilkins.
It's been a long time in coming. Obviously, our previous document is no longer fit for purpose. It was developed over 15 years ago and doesn't fit what we require now. Your methodology of working alongside planning is vital, because this document is really about what our vision for Somerset, what Somerset will look like in the future. That's what it's about, as much as it is about particular schemes which clearly don't feature, as it's a high-level document. It is very much needed so that we can move forward. And I'd just like to reiterate that this will fit alongside, inside and alongside the local plan, is what I understand. But it's very interesting how you've divided up the different communities, and every town will claim that they're completely different to the next one, and vice versa. But actually, I think you've done a really incredible job of piecing communities together, rather than hiding them, which is what transport's all about, to be quite honest. So it is vital we move forward on this. There's a great opportunity for consultation. I think some members of the audience are quite keen to get involved in that, by the sounds of it. But you know, we have to move forward on this, and get it going, because the other side of this is that it has to fit in what Somerset requires, but it has to do it in words that the government understand, and that's exactly the point of this document. It has to make sense to those that will be using it for our benefit. So I commend this very much so. And it'll be interesting to see the feedback, and hopefully it won't be parochial, the feedback, because that is always the risk. People want to see their particular scheme or their particular area of interest, but let's hope we get some overarching comments back which look at it in the whole, which is very much set out to do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Evans.
I'm almost nervous to make a parochial comment now. First of all, I'm very much welcome this draft report. I think it links in superbly well with our planning and our climate change aspirations. I'm really pleased to hear about the journey of its consultation. I appreciate that meeting timetables don't always fit with the governance and consultation, but please, it's going through scrutiny with LCNs and city, town, and parish councils where relevant. Also, please, we like reference to the importance of regional devolution and being able to access funding as well from the questions, and for me that's why it's important that we press ahead with this. Deliberately, we look to work with counties that were similar to us in Dorset and Wiltshire, because we felt that was there was a unifying element in terms of how our counties work in a structural economic way. Just for me, one of the comments I've made at this stage is around there's some references to seasonal tourism within the document, and there are double asterisks where that is. And I was intrigued by the inclusion and exclusion of certain places from that list. I'm not sure whether there's a criteria that lie behind that. But, Dulverton, Watford, Cheddar, Porlock, I can see, and obviously Burnham and Minehead as being particularly impacted by seasonal factors, whereas I would also put Barrow-Bree and Axbridge in with that as well, and there are probably some other communities as well. Just very intrigued by Evercreech being a tourism hotspot. I've just checked on TripAdvisor. Can't see anything that's going to attract me to Evercreech. There is a petting zoo there. Looks for an alpaca, which I'm looking forward to. And North Petherton's there. And I will always bang the drum for North Petherton. And you're welcome into the Globe or the Lamb or to experience culture kebabs, of course. But I'm not sure it makes it a tourism hotspot, so I'd be really intrigued about those double asterisks there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Adams. To avoid the charge of parochialism, I feel the need to say something about Froome or Henstridge or somewhere a long way from where I live. Nothing is springing immediately to mind, so I'm going to throw it open to comments elsewhere. Councillor Coles or anyone online. I see we have Councillors Locke, Osborne and Leishon online, so over to you if you fancy contributing at this point. I'll take that as a no. Okay, well, thank you very much in that case for that, Matthew, and we'll move on to item 6. Actually, we probably need to just vote on this, don't we, to pass it through before we move on. So there is a recommendation. So to approve this draft local transport plan as provided in Appendix 1 for the purposes of public consultation in the spring of this year. Is that as much as I need to say? Do I need to read the whole thing out? You can just highlight it. Okay. Good. All right. Well, if we can hold the vote on that basis, can I have a proposal, Councillor Wilkins, seconded by Councillor Evans? All those in favour? Excellent. Good. We'll now move on to item 6, bus service improvement plan funding 25 to 26, and Natasha's going to introduce this for us, please. Thank you.
Bear with me a sec.
If it's okay, I'll just jump in to introduce Natasha, Chair.
Sorry, I do apologise. You want to introduce that first? Crack on, Councillor Wilkins.
Yeah. Obviously, we noted some funding for this year with the bus improvement plan scheme. That's for the 25-26 year, and we're hopeful. It's been certainly indicated that we'll be moving to a more multi-year funded programme after that. Hopefully we can show that where we have spent bus improvement money, we've spent it well, and that is vital, I think, in future funding schemes. Previously, when the BSIP funding came in, we've concentrated it on schemes mainly in the Taunton area to demonstrate how best these schemes, how best we can get improvements across our network. But this year we're looking to spread that out to the rest of Somerset as best we can. So our learnings from Taunton, which have been incredible, and have really demonstrated where we've made some vital improvements to our bus service, which, as you quite rightly said, very much in need in Somerset. We're now looking to roll some of those schemes out to the whole of Somerset, and we think this is the best way forward. So I'll turn over to Natasha to really put meat on the bone.
Thank you. So, as Councillor Wilkins has said, we've got funding for 1 year at the moment for 25-26. We don't know what's coming in the future. There is a suggestion that there may be a multi-year settlement followed, but at the moment we just have to work with the funding we know we've got. So the good news this time round is we didn't have to bid for any funding from government. They've got a new formula that they're using to allocate funding, and that's based on population, bus mileage and level of need. So they've used that formula to work out how much funding each local authority will get. And Somerset has been awarded approximately 3.3 million in capital funding and 2.9 million in revenue funding. So just to clarify, in terms of that funding, we previously had two funding pots. So we had BSIP Plus, which was funding allocated to support services that were either at risk of being withdrawn or were withdrawn commercially following the COVID pandemic. So there's that funding pot. And then we also had an original BSIP funding pot for improving and enhancing services. So now the government have put those two pots together and given one funding award. We only received formal notification and the terms of use just before Christmas. So we've been working at pace since we returned in the new year to really try and move this forward and understand how we can use the funding. And we have to submit a delivery plan to the DfT by the end of March this year, setting out how we will actually use that funding. So in terms of what we've actually done to date, we have consulted with our local bus operators. So we've talked to the operators about how the current BSIP schemes are going, what's working well, and where they feel that we could introduce enhancements to the network as well. So we've had those discussions. We've looked at our existing BSIP schemes. So looking at kind of how we've funded those, what's worked well. We've looked at the BSIP for 2024, which was our latest revision that set out our longer term ambitions. So looked at what we said we try and achieve and how we might be able to do that. We've had feedback and suggestions from the Somerset Bus Partnership, which has been really welcomed. We've had discussions with the bus user and stakeholder group. And we've also had lots of other suggestions and recommendations from interested parties, parish councils, town councils, members of the public, in terms of how they feel we should be using funding. So we've taken all of that information and used that to develop our high-level funding themes. In terms of governance, as we've said, the timescales are very challenging and we appreciate that. So we've had discussions at the Bus Advisory Board to look at high-level themes. We're obviously bringing this report here today to the Planning and Transport Committee. We will take the report through scrutiny next week, so they will have a chance to review it as well. And then the final recommendations for the specific schemes to be funded will be taken through a lead member delegated decision on the 13th of March. So that's the process we need to follow. In terms of funding themes, as Councillor Wilkins has said, we want to replicate the success in Taunton through the BSIP round one funding. So we're looking at all the schemes we've had in Taunton and we'd like to continue with those schemes that are working well. I think at this point it's probably worth pointing out that where we have the £1 fare scheme that moved to £1.50, whilst that has been a really good scheme and has really generated patronage, which was our aim following COVID, it's actually a scheme that's quite expensive to fund. And actually, if we were to roll that out in other areas of the county, it would prevent us from doing some other really good initiatives. So we feel that actually that £1.50 fare scheme will come to an end at the end of the trial as planned at the end of March. And then the other thing we want to look at is delivering similar packages to that in Taunton, but looking at Yeovil and Bridgwater and looking at other targeted initiatives where we feel that may be beneficial, and then some county-wide initiatives. So I'll give you a little more detail on the next couple of slides. So in terms of the Taunton Town package, we've had evening services into Taunton, and those have been running really well. So we need to look at those services and look at how they're performing and what we do beyond March with those evening services. Now, just to clarify, in terms of a funding model for evening services, those are services that have been running during the daytime commercially, and we've just put some additional funding in to put some extra journeys in the evening up until about 11 o'clock at night. So that's how we've decided which routes we would fund. We will review any current BSIP plus funded services in the Taunton area and look at what needs to happen to those beyond March. We're reviewing the Park and Ride fare. So we've got a £1 fare on the Park and Ride, which is a separate initiative and obviously requires a lot less funding. So that's been doing really well and really increasing patronage on the Park and Ride. So we're reviewing that, and we're also looking at our transport hubs within Taunton and whether we need to look at doing a little more with those as well. So then moving on to the Yeovil Town package. Like I said, looking at the funding model, we'd like to look at what we can do with evening services in Yeovil. So we're looking at options at the moment. We're also reviewing the current BSIP plus funded services that operate in and around the Yeovil area. And we are looking at other suggestions, other service improvements and trials within the Yeovil Town. Alongside that, we'd like to roll out bus priority signal improvements. So we're doing something similar in the Taunton Town area, and that piece of work looks at tackling congestion hotspots, pinch points within the town to try and get buses moving much more quickly through the traffic. So we'd like to roll a similar improvement scheme out in Yeovil. And the last one on the list there is a feasibility study for the Yeovil Transport Hub. So we will be working with the regeneration team who are working on the Glover's Walk side of things and look at producing a feasibility study for a future hub. You'll note, obviously, we've only put it in as a feasibility study because it is a year's worth of funding. It's not something we're going to be able to deliver on the ground within that year's funding period. And then the final kind of town package is a Bridgewater Town package. So similar to Yeovil, looking at evening services, other service improvements and trials, again, the bus priority signal improvements and a feasibility study for Bridgewater Transport Hub. You'll note it doesn't mention BSIP plus funded services, and that's because there aren't currently any in the Bridgewater Town area that need reviewing. And then moving on to the last couple of areas. So other targeted initiatives, we will review the remaining BSIP plus funded services that aren't in those main towns that we're already funding to look at what happens beyond March. We're looking at digital demand responsive transport. So we have a trial in the Somerton area where we've got digital side of things on our DRT, so people can book on an app or a website, and they can book up to an hour before they need to travel. And so we'd like to roll that digital element out to some of our other existing DRT services. We're looking at other service improvements and trials where we've had suggestions and looking at what we might be able to deliver. Looking at feasibility studies for improvements to other transport hubs in the county. And the last one on the list is to trial carrying bikes on buses. Now, I know this committee was very keen that we look at being able to trial that. And so we are looking at our options, but just to caveat that with the fact that we do need to find a willing operator who feels that they have a suitable bus service for that. So we may not be able to take that forward, but we're looking at it at the moment. And then finally, county-wide initiatives. So we are looking at delivering an online county-wide bus map and timetable booklet. So that will include all bus operator services in one place, so people don't have to look around and search different websites to find the information. We're working with First South West at the moment. They've already got something set up for their services and First West of England. So we're looking to build on that and put everything into one location. We need to look at marketing and promotion, monitoring and evaluation. So any schemes that we will be funding, we will obviously want to promote those and make sure people are aware of them and encourage people to use them, and then look at how we monitor them to make sure we understand how well they're performing and what we need to do differently or how we can roll this out into other areas in the future. We're looking at a stop design and improvement programme. So we really want to look at setting up a strategy for how we deliver bus shelters across the county, setting minimum standards, and then once that strategy is in place, rolling that improvement programme out across the county and having a priority list of where they need to be targeted first. And then the final thing on the list is bus passenger information. So looking at real-time information and that's looking at key hubs and interchanges. So we're not proposing to roll that out to all bus stops across the county. That just wouldn't be practical and viable. We're looking at those kind of key hubs, which would be like bus stations or transport hubs. But obviously we've got some work to do at looking at how we manage those and maintain that longer term. So that's the final item on the list. And so that's just a run through of where we are in terms of high level funding. And we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. That's really good. The problem for you though is it was so good. I've written lots of things down that I'm now going to say and ask. I think what I'd like us to do, we talked about this earlier in the year. It's too early to say, but I'd like us to keep a close eye to monitor the impact of the government's increase from £2 to £3 fare to see what that means for patronage. It may well be that there's an opportunity, if there's a significant drop off, for us to go back to government and say, look, as part of perhaps an approach by all councils to say, look, this has had quite a serious impact. Maybe you want to have another think about it. My understanding is that the difference raised very little extra money for government in the grand scheme of its budget. So something to have a think about there. I'm also wondering whether first are planning to do anything to hang on to the increased patronage that the £1.50 fare in Taunton delivered. I saw on social media over the last few days some questions, people asking about what would the price return to, and people were talking about, return fares within Taunton of £5 and £6, which seems unreasonable, frankly. I don't know if that's accurate, but I think it would be good to see if first plan to do anything, their own promotions without external support to try and retain some of that. I think it would be a very good idea to speak to local members in and around Bridgewater and Yeovil so that they can have an input into perhaps suggesting which services, which communities might be best served by the evening buses. I'll put in a plea for Yeovilton, having spoken to the XO there about the opportunity for the 4,000 people who are based in and around the air station there to be able to get into and out of Yeovil at night would be a good opportunity. I just wanted to pick up on the point about bus prioritisation in Bridgewater and to a plea really that if we are going to do anything there, we try and roll it out really quickly. We've got a lot of stuff ongoing on in Bridgewater at the moment, and what I wouldn't want to do is to finish all of that and then go back in and do some of the signals again. So if there's an opportunity to roll that into what's going on now, I think the people of Bridgewater would appreciate that. You mentioned DRT in Somerton. I think it would be good if you could perhaps bring a report on how that's progressed to a future meeting of this subcommittee. I really like the idea of a unified timetable. I know when I've tried to find a new bus service, if you don't know the number to put in that service, it's a bit of an effort trying to find out how you actually get between two places. So I think that would be really useful. And then finally, I just wanted to say that if you can get the trial of buses carrying bikes up and away, you'll have one very happy Councillor Edric Hobbs. And that was all from me. I'm not sure there's anything there you necessarily need to respond to, but if you feel like it, please do.
You. Yeah, just to say, in terms of the move from the £2 to £3 fare, we are obviously working with operators and monitoring the impact on that. It's a bit early to say at the moment, and operators are having kind of mixed views on the impact. And obviously, we've had a lot of weather issues as well, which has affected patronage. So we will be monitoring that closely over the next few months. In terms of the Taunton £1.50 fare, first I've got a new fare structure that's come out beginning of January, but for Taunton that will come into effect from beginning of April, and they do have fares for like the town services. I think it's £2.40 single for the town services, so that's like 40 Yeovil, Taunton. So they will have that, and they'll be promoting that at the end of the £1.50 fare. And other than that, I think, yeah, I've taken on board your comments, so thank you.
Thanks very much, Natasha. Anyone else? Sam?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, probably just also worth saying on the £2.40 fare in Taunton, the tap on, tap off gets increasingly cheap the more you use it. So the way that is structured, if you use it via tap on, tap off, you get better value throughout your week if you're a regular traveller. And I wanted to, Chair, pick up on the point about bus priority in Bridgewater as well, just to say that the system that we're looking at using for that is a technology-based system, so it doesn't actually involve any kind of invasive works. So we would be looking to, change the infrastructure in the signal boxes rather than come along and build bus lanes. So it's not a bus lane programme, it's a technology system.
Brilliant. I can feel the wave of relief from Bridgewater washing over us as we hear that. So that's really good news. Thank you for that. Anyone else have any comments? Councillor Wilkins.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that in the lead up to this, we received quite a number of requests from all around the county for use of this funding, and so we've been very strategic in the way that we put suggestions in, and a lot of what, for instance, the bus partnership and other bus user groups have suggested we've taken on board. The ticketing side of things, I think, is a vital improvement that needs to go forward, and getting that integration across our transport network, I think is vital, because when something's difficult to use, people don't use it. So I see that as a vital part of where we move forward, and I really appreciate the effort that the bus user groups have put in to putting forward some really excellent recommendations to us. I'll just leave that there. It's not really a question.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. Any other comments from within the room? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby, and just first of all, thank you to the officers who worked so hard to bring this forward. Very welcome and interesting to hear the impact this has had on Taunton particularly. I'd just like to try and understand with the Bridgewater and Yeovil evening schemes, Councillor Rigby sort of raised some of the areas around Yeovil, and I would similarly highlight some of the areas around Bridgewater. How far out will these schemes go in terms of services? Will there be any regard paid to some of the larger communities around those towns being able to have access to the evening services?
So yeah, we're still working on the final schemes that we will be funding for those, but we are looking at, like I said, the model with the commercial services. So we'll have to look at what's running commercially during the day and where we can put those evening services on. Just to give you an idea, for where we say Taunton evening services, they're not all concentrated entirely in the town service. So we've got evening services running out to Minehead, to Wellington, to Bridgewater. So it does kind of move out further, but it will just depend on where we can invest in those commercial services.
Thank you. I'll look forward to seeing more detail on that once it's worked up. Inevitably, when it was just Taunton, Bridgewater and Yeovil said, why not us? What do I say to Frome Town Council on Wednesday evening when they say, why not us?
Well, I think where we are at the moment is that the amount of money that we've got, if we spread it too thinly, wouldn't achieve what we're trying to achieve. So we do understand that we've got to go kind of piece by piece across the county, and the what about us is, well, when we get the next funding settlement, we'll look at what the next funding settlement is giving us, and then hopefully, Frome will be in that bunch, and other towns in that bunch. So yeah, it's a how we spread it very widely at the moment is the challenge.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was expecting, but I just wanted to get the answer here. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Can we take comments from the public at this stage? We don't normally do that, do we? Is it? Well, it's in this barrier.
First bus group initiative now is that single fares of 3 miles and less will all be charged at £2.40, and I think that will cover all the Taunton fares. I'm not sure about the Monkston Heathfield, if that's over 3 miles. But generally, all the routes within Taunton will be £2.40 single. What we do miss so much are what they used to call the transfer tickets, where, for instance, if I travelled from Norton Fitzwarren to Blackbrook, I could buy a ticket into town, and then that ticket would still be valid on the ongoing bus when I had to break my journey in the centre of Taunton. We lost those when the fare cap came in, and so it was a lot cheaper to travel when the transfer tickets were still available. A return journey now is twice as much or more from April than it would have been before COVID, when the transfer tickets still existed. There's a number of new initiatives that First Bus aren't actively promoting. One of them is their new group tickets, where up to 5 people can travel for the price of 2 people. But that is not being marketed in any way at all. There's also day tickets, week tickets, month tickets that tap on, tap off will automatically charge, but you do have to pay that way to get the advantage of them if you don't buy them ahead. But there are a lot of changes to the fares, and we do definitely need multi-operator tickets as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. That's really helpful. I'm going to look at Natasha now and just ask if you can perhaps bring those points up with the operators. The group ticket thing I've never come across. The tap on, tap off cost reduction thing is sorry. I might have known. The tap on, tap off thing is something that completely passed me by as well. So I think there is a real job to do in marketing those elements in particular. And the transfer tickets, I'd forgotten they existed pre-COVID. So if we can get those back again, that'd be really useful. If you could pick those up, that'd be great. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll definitely pick those up. We've got a meeting with First later this week, and that includes their marketing representative as well. So I'll pick that up with her around the group ticket and the tap on, tap off. So that's fine. And in terms of just to add about integrated ticketing, we are working on that with Southwest Peninsula. We're trying to do something that's more regional. So as well as being able to have an interoperable ticket within the county, it will help for cross-border journeys as well. So we are hoping to work with them shortly to get something up and running.
Brilliant, really good to hear. Thank you very much. I don't think there's anything that we need to resolve on this then. Sorry. Yes, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to vote on the recommendations, which are that the Planning and Transport Policy Executive Subcommittee agrees: 1, the general funding theme set out in Appendix A, which broadly sets out how the funding will be used to improve public bus service provision in the county. 2, delegate authority to the lead member for transport and waste in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer to agree the final specific schemes to be funded within each funding theme. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Evans, and a seconder, Councillor Wilkins. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, item 7, Puriton Primary single class expansion community infrastructure levy request, and Sarah Luss going to introduce. It's somebody else now. Phil. Fire away, Phil. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Apologies I couldn't be with you this morning. So the purpose of this item is to request the release of £558,000 worth of community infrastructure levy funding from the Area North pot to education for the purposes of expanding Puriton Primary School. As a result of recent developments in the village, we need to mitigate the impact of the additional children coming from them and expand Puriton Primary School with an additional classroom. The project is set to cost £700,000. We have £142,000 of Section 106 in the bank, and therefore we need £558,000 of SIL to meet the gap and deliver the project in time for September 2026.
Thank you very much. Anything to request or add at this point, Councillor Evans?
Thank the officers who are working hard on providing sufficiency, particularly in the areas around Bridgewater where there is considerable development and pressure because of the annual investment that's happening there. That's clearly the case for Puriton. But I understand that the school site will not be able to accommodate any further extension, and we need to be aware that should this community continue to expand, we will have a sufficiency issue in the area, and we need to plan accordingly in the local plan. But very happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Any other comments in the room or online? I see no hands, so Phil, you've done a superb job, got us to record time, so I'll just ask Councillor to vote on the recommendation, which is that the Planning and Transport Policy Executive Committee agrees to approve the release of £558,000 in SIL funding, Marion North, to education for the purposes of expanding Puriton Primary School. Can I have a proposal, please? Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor Wilkins, all those in favour? Excellent, thank you very much. Move on to item 8, the Local Development Scheme for 2025, and I understand that Laura Higgins is going to introduce the item for us.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek your approval of the revised Local Development Scheme, which we will then submit to the government. The Local Development Scheme is a project plan for our development plan, which includes the local plan and the minerals and waste plan. All local planning authorities have been requested to update their local development scheme. This is because of the changes to the planning system, the new national planning policy framework, and the increase in housing requirements, housing number requirements. It's also an opportunity for us to revise or review how we're getting on, whether we can streamline the plan, and how we can get a plan in place as soon as possible, because we have a lack of a 5-year housing land supply. So it's really important to have our local plan in place as soon as possible. So we've considered the way in which we can streamline the plan. We've had discussions with a critical friend. We've talked to a planning inspector. We had an advisory meeting with them, and we've considered our resources and budget pressures as well. We've concluded that in revising the scope and timetable of the local plan, that we should include only strategic policies and site allocations policies, and not include development management policies. So site allocations policies, we would be considering including or needing to include housing sites which deliver housing for the first 5 years and years 6 to 10. For years 11 plus, we can consider looking at broad locations only, but we will consider that depending on what sites get proposed to us through the call for sites that's currently live at the moment. By not including development management policies, those particular policies are the detailed policies, like a local interpretation of national policy. We don't ever have to include those in local plans, but we can choose to if we wish to. But that's an opportunity to help streamline the local plan itself. The other reason for not needing to include those is nationally, the government are introducing national development management policies. Now, these are those detailed policies to save us time, basically, in producing our local plan. So, for example, a development management policy might talk about perhaps policies about like overlooking or overbearing detailed design matters. Those would be standardised across the country. There's also indications that it will include detailed policies on managing flood risk, coastal change, more detail on social rent, affordable housing delivery, but that remains to be seen at the moment, and those are going to be, hopefully, they say, consulted upon in the spring and then to come into force later in the year. So they will help us inform the scope of our local plan. So in conclusion, the report sets out the new proposed timetable of the local plan and the scope that we're going to cover, but it's likely we're going to have to revise this local development scheme again, because the new Levelling Up and Regeneration Act that will be coming into force is likely to set out a 30-month timetable for the production of local plans. So we'll have to, once we've got the detail of that, we can then revise our local plan timetable again. And once we know the detail of the national development management policies, that will help us as well with the scope. Okay, that's probably the summary for now. If you've got any questions?
Any questions? No, I'm seeing nothing else in the room. Oh, Councillor Wakefield, when did you sneak in? You did that so quietly.
Well, it's come on, I think. No, honestly, I don't know anything about this at all. I'm really sorry to ask questions about it, but does the local development scheme, which this is talking about, which I don't really understand, have any effect on the 5-year housing supply?
The local development scheme itself doesn't. The local development scheme is just a project plan. It says when we will start how we will progress the local plan in its timetable, the stages that we will go through, and our anticipated timetable for getting there. What we're trying to do within this report is streamline and speed up as much as we possibly can the production of the local plan, so that when the local plan is adopted, that will then have site allocations to indicate where the housing will come forward and to support our 5-year housing land supply. So it will, once it's adopted. It does through the local plan stages. The local plan has more weight the sooner we get to certain consultation stages, like the Regulation 18, Regulation 19 stage. That may change with the new system, but the quicker we can get to certain stages in the local plan production, it will help with our 5-year housing land supply.
Thank you very much for the questions, Sarah, and for the response. Alison would like to just add something.
Yes, as Laura said, as the plan moves through the plan making stages, we give more weight to what's in the plan. We're in the current scheme, as before you today, is proposing to get to Regulation 18 next spring. At that point, we will have draft site allocations, which will go out to consultation. Subject to those not receiving a significant objections, and particularly from statutory consultees, we will be able to afford those weight in decision making, so in development management decisions. So that is our aim, is to progress as quickly as possible to that stage, so that we can do that, bearing in mind our 5-year housing land supply.
Thank you, Alison. I think it's fair to say that the combination of nutrient neutrality and the government's uprating of our housing delivery targets has put us in some difficulty in terms of the 5-year housing land supply. We're aware of that, and these steps that we're taking are designed specifically to try and get us through that wilderness period, if you like, as quickly as possible. And as Alison's just said, I think once we've got to that stage next spring, we should have something that we can use to address considerable weight when we're determining planning applications and appeals are being considered. So we're moving as quickly as we can to get through that period. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. I think it's probably the first time I've maybe looked in on one of these, other than when we've been discussing neighbourhood plans. My question is, stemming from this, it seems as though we're not going to be able to have our own development management plans. So the bottom line is, in terms of seeking contributions or making us of developers, we're going to be tied into the government's national development management plans. I think that's what they're now going to be called, plus maybe relying on the NPPF. So we discussed earlier, or it came as a paper, the local transport plan. So presumably the local transport plan won't now be, say, worked into a development management document to give it any extra teeth. What flex are we going to have to ensure that the uniqueness of Somerset is recognised? Because one size doesn't fit all. And this is my concern with national, and I'm sure it's yours, with national top-down schemes of delegation, etc., that they don't necessarily recognise the special characteristics of your area, which is what we're all trying to do. And it feels as though government's trying to squash that.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. I think from my understanding, what's being discussed here is that we may end up with national development management policies on particular issues, but we'll still have a local plan which sets out where we think are the most appropriate areas for new development. But perhaps I can just pass over to Laura to confirm my understanding is correct or not.
Yes, Chair, your understanding is correct. Obviously, we will wait to see what the national development management policies contain. There is still scope for us to change and introduce additional policies if we need them. We will be required as part of the development of the local plan to do an infrastructure delivery plan, which will set out what infrastructure requirements are needed to support the development and the sites that we're proposing for allocation. And I suppose that's where the highway and transport implications will be addressed. We are working alongside our colleagues on the local transport plan, and we will make sure that they are aligned.
Thank you, Alison. I see no. Oh, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. It may be helpful as well to note that in adopting previous transport policies, we have had specific recommendations that they should be adopted and considered as a material consideration in planning matters. So I think we can continue that approach so that it's not necessarily, transport documents are not necessarily part of the development scheme, but actually when they're adopted, it is stated that the council's intention and members' intentions was for them to be a material consideration. So we'll make sure that gets taken through in adopting the transport policy documents.
Thanks very much, Mike. Okay, so we'll move to the recommendation, which is that the Planning and Transport Policy Executive Subcommittee agrees to approve the Local Development Scheme Appendix 1 as the Council's work programme for delivering the development plan, and B, in consultation with the lead member for Economic Development, Planning and Assets, delegated authority is given to the Head of Planning to agree on any necessary final amendments prior to its publication. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Wilkins, seconded. Councillor Evans, and all those in favour. That is carried. Thank you very much. That just leaves us to discuss item 9, the forward plan. Alison Blom-Cooper, please to take us through that.
I can put it on the screen if you want.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Chair, I think the items for the next meeting on the 8th of April are a proposal for SIL allocation towards a new school in Wilstock, and I think the waterways study should be on there, I believe. Chair, I think we have previously mentioned that, but it doesn't seem to appear on that. I'm not aware of any other items at this stage.
Yeah, so just to highlight the date for the 25-26 meetings are currently in discussion. So there may be some items that we know are coming forward, but we don't have actual dates for the meetings yet. So that is all I've got for the next one in April, which is Wilstock and Waterways from Vinnie Clifford. So if we've got any further items that we think are coming forward in the future, please let me know. And then when we have meetings confirmed, I will add them to those relevant meetings.
Thank you, Josh. Councillor Evans.
You can't underestimate my excitement about the Wilstock School being on an agenda. But can you just clarify what waterway study we're looking at? We have a lot of water in Somerset, and I'm always keen to study it.
It's the Taunton Waterway Study, which you may remember came to this committee previously to go out to consultation. It's the response to the consultation that will be coming back and for finalisation and adoption of the document as the material planning consideration.
Thank you very much. If the word Taunton could be inserted at the front of that.
It's for now.
Before my very eyes, it's happened. If only happened back quickly every time. Well done.
I think we'll need similar qualification for Wilstock as well. I've never heard of this place, so we better have some more detail. Okay, I think we're all done in that case. Anyone else want to say anything? No. Can't see any hands. Good. All right. Well, I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation, for helping it to run slightly ahead of time. Thank you.